In this episode, we focus on how a security program becomes something people actually participate in rather than something they quietly tolerate. Many beginners think a program succeeds when policies are approved and controls are deployed, but in real organizations, success shows up as consistent behavior, steady collaboration, and fewer surprises. That kind of success does not happen automatically because people have habits, priorities, and deadlines that compete with security goals. Socializing the program means introducing it in a way that makes sense to the organization, earns trust, and invites partnership instead of resistance. The point is not to create hype or run a marketing campaign, but to build durable support that survives staff turnover, shifting budgets, and inevitable pushback. When a program is well socialized, people know what it is trying to do, why it matters, and how their role connects to it in practical terms. That understanding creates champions, and champions are what turns security from a periodic project into a lasting capability. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A security program becomes easier to socialize when you can describe it in plain language that ties directly to mission outcomes and everyday work. People do not need a complex framework explanation to understand that the organization wants fewer outages, fewer data mishandling mistakes, faster recovery when something breaks, and clearer rules about who can access what. When the message is simple and grounded, it feels relevant, and relevance is the first step toward adoption. A common beginner mistake is to speak in broad abstractions like improving posture or strengthening resilience without translating what that means for different teams. Instead, you want to explain what will change in the experience of normal work, such as approvals becoming clearer, reporting paths becoming simpler, or recovery expectations becoming more predictable. If people can picture the change, they can participate, and participation is what creates durable support. Socialization is not a separate activity that happens after the real work, because it shapes whether the real work gets used correctly. Durable support also depends on trust, and trust is built when the program demonstrates that it understands the organization's constraints and does not treat everyone as a problem waiting to happen. People are far more likely to support changes when they believe security is trying to help them succeed, not trying to catch them doing something wrong. That means you acknowledge that teams operate under time pressure and that they need predictable processes, not vague rules and surprise blocks. It also means you treat questions as signals to improve clarity rather than as evidence of incompetence. A security program that responds to confusion by simplifying language and reducing friction builds credibility quickly. By contrast, a program that responds to confusion by adding more rules or blaming teams trains people to hide problems, which increases risk. Socialization is therefore partly about communication style, because tone sets the emotional context for adoption. One of the best ways to socialize a program is to start with a clear narrative about why now, because timing matters to how people interpret change. If a program appears suddenly, people may assume it is a reaction to an incident, a compliance scare, or leadership panic, even if that is not true. A calm explanation of drivers helps the organization see the program as intentional, such as changes in the threat environment, growth in the organization, new partnerships, or a desire to improve reliability and reduce emergency work. When people understand why the program exists, they are less likely to interpret it as arbitrary control. This narrative should also explain what the program is not, because boundaries reduce anxiety. If you are not trying to slow delivery or add constant approvals, say that in a concrete way by emphasizing the focus on risk-based controls for critical systems and sensitive data. A clear narrative creates a shared mental model, and shared mental models are the foundation of coordinated behavior. Building champions begins with identifying who has influence in the organization, and influence is not always tied to formal titles. Some people are trusted because they solve hard problems, others are trusted because they mentor newcomers, and others are trusted because they translate complex changes into workable habits. Champions are most effective when they are respected by their peers and when they understand enough about the program to advocate honestly rather than blindly. The goal is not to recruit cheerleaders who repeat slogans, but to build partners who can explain trade-offs, surface friction early, and help refine the program so it fits real workflows. Beginners should also understand that champions should represent different parts of the organization because one champion group cannot speak for every team. A champion in engineering may not understand the daily realities of finance, and a champion in operations may not see the same risks as customer support. Socializing the program through a network of champions allows adaptation without losing consistency. The process of earning champions often starts by listening first and then showing that listening led to real adjustments, because people become champions when they feel ownership. If you ask teams what slows them down, what confuses them, and what risks worry them, you gather valuable information while also signaling respect. However, listening without action can backfire because it teaches people that security collects feedback but does not change. A program that socializes well closes the loop by reflecting what was heard, making targeted improvements, and then crediting the teams who contributed. This is not about public praise as a gimmick, but about demonstrating that collaboration shapes outcomes. When teams see that their input reduces friction and clarifies expectations, they become invested in the program's success. Investment is what creates durable support, because invested teams will defend the program during future debates. In practical terms, listening and closing loops is one of the strongest adoption accelerators you can build. Another part of socialization is choosing the right level of consistency across teams, because too much uniformity can create friction while too little consistency creates confusion. The program needs a stable set of outcomes and minimum requirements, such as how sensitive data is handled or how critical access is approved, so risk is managed predictably. At the same time, different teams may need flexibility in how they meet those outcomes, because their tools, workflows, and constraints differ. Socialization is where you explain which elements are non-negotiable outcomes and which elements can vary by team method. This prevents teams from feeling trapped by one-size-fits-all rules, and it prevents the program from fragmenting into inconsistent local policies. Beginners should recognize that governance is often a balance between standardization and autonomy, and socialization is the bridge that helps teams accept that balance. When teams understand the boundary between outcomes and methods, they can participate without feeling controlled in unworkable ways. Clear messaging is necessary, but messaging alone is not enough, because people learn through experience. Socialization should therefore include early experiences that make the program feel helpful, such as clearer request paths, more predictable approval timelines, and easier access to guidance. If the first experience people have is frustration, like a confusing rule that blocks work with no support, they will anchor their perception of the program to that negative experience. Good programs design early interactions carefully, ensuring that new expectations come with simple explanations and clear next steps. This includes making the secure path easier than the insecure path, because convenience shapes behavior more than intentions. When socialization improves experience, people begin to associate security with reduced chaos rather than increased friction. That association is what leads teams to become champions on their own, because they will recommend the approach to others when it makes their work smoother. Communication channels matter in socialization, but the deeper principle is meeting people where they already pay attention. If the organization relies on team meetings to coordinate work, then program updates should be designed to fit that format, with short explanations and space for questions. If the organization relies heavily on internal chat, then guidance must be accessible and concise, searchable forms that can be referenced quickly during real work. If leaders communicate through structured updates, then the program should provide leadership-ready summaries that connect progress to outcomes. A common pitfall is assuming a single email can socialize a complex change, because sending information is not the same as changing behavior. Socialization uses multiple touchpoints that are consistent with each other, so people hear the same core message in different contexts without feeling spammed. Consistency builds trust, because it signals that the program is stable and not constantly shifting direction. Stability is a key ingredient in durable support. When the goal is building champions, it helps to equip them with simple explanations and practical examples they can reuse, because champions spread adoption through everyday conversations. If a champion can explain a policy change with a clear why and a clear how, they can prevent confusion before it spreads. Practical examples are especially helpful because they turn abstract rules into decisions, such as what to do when sharing a document externally or how to handle a suspicious message. Champions also need to know the boundaries of the program so they do not accidentally overpromise or invent new requirements. Socialization should therefore include a shared language and shared definitions, because shared language reduces misinterpretation. Beginners should see this as building a common operating picture, where different teams can coordinate using the same terms. When champions use consistent language, adoption becomes more uniform even when methods differ. That uniform adoption is what makes support durable across the organization. Another powerful socialization move is to make progress visible in ways that feel meaningful rather than performative. People become more supportive when they can see that the program is delivering outcomes, such as fewer recurring issues, clearer ownership, or faster recovery from disruptions. This is where outcome-based metrics can help, as long as they are communicated carefully and tied to real experience. For example, if a recovery initiative reduces the time to restore a service during a disruption, that is something teams feel, and that feeling reinforces support. If access governance reduces the number of confusing access problems and speeds up legitimate access decisions, that improvement is also felt. Socialization turns these improvements into shared stories that emphasize learning and progress rather than embarrassment. A metric like Key Performance Indicator, KPI, can be useful when it measures something the organization cares about, and when it guides decisions rather than just filling a dashboard. When progress is visible and tied to experience, champions have evidence to support their advocacy. Durable support also depends on handling friction honestly, because no program change is friction-free, and pretending otherwise creates distrust. When teams experience added steps or new rules, they will test whether security acknowledges the cost and works to reduce it. A program that listens to friction reports and then refines processes sends a message that it values operational reality. This does not mean removing every constraint, because some friction is necessary to reduce high-impact risk, but it does mean ensuring that friction is placed where it matters. Socialization includes explaining that placement, such as why privileged access needs stricter verification than routine access. It also includes showing that the program is willing to simplify low-impact areas so teams do not feel burdened everywhere. Beginners should learn that support is durable when teams believe the program is fair and rational. Fairness in this context means that requirements match risk and that the program is consistent in how it applies them. Executive backing is important, but durable support fails if it only exists at the top, because daily behavior is shaped locally. Socialization, therefore, needs both top-down clarity and bottom-up engagement, where leadership sets direction and teams help implement it in workable ways. Leadership sponsorship can remove barriers and signal importance, but local champions make the program real in daily decisions. A balanced approach might involve leaders explaining why the program matters for mission, while champions demonstrate how it helps teams work more safely and predictably. This also protects the program during leadership changes, because the program is not dependent on one person's attention to survive. When support is distributed, it becomes a cultural element rather than a leadership preference. Beginners should see this as risk management in itself, because a program that collapses when leadership focus shifts is not resilient. Socialization that builds distributed ownership creates resilience. As the program matures, socialization becomes less about launching initiatives and more about reinforcing norms, because norms are what persist. Reinforcement can include periodic refreshers, manager coaching, consistent language and onboarding, and reminders embedded in normal workflows. The program should also keep its promises, meaning that if it claims to reduce chaos and clarify decisions, it must continue to refine areas that cause recurring pain. Durable support comes from consistency over time, not from one-time enthusiasm. When new hires join, they should encounter the program as normal, not as a special campaign. And that normalcy is achieved through repeated integration into routine processes. Beginners should notice that durable support is built through repetition and reliability, which is why socialization is never truly finished. It evolves from introduction to maintenance, but it remains essential. A program that stops socializing will slowly lose alignment as the organization changes. Socializing a security program internally is ultimately about turning governance into shared practice by building understanding, trust, and practical adoption paths. You start with a clear narrative that connects to mission and avoids unnecessary fear, and you build champions by listening, closing loops, and equipping trusted people with reusable explanations. You manage the balance between consistent outcomes and flexible methods so teams can participate without losing operational fit, and you design early experiences that feel helpful rather than obstructive. You make progress visible with meaningful measures, acknowledge friction honestly, and adjust to reduce unnecessary burdens while keeping high-impact controls strong. When this is done well, the program gains durable support because it becomes part of how work is done, not an extra layer that people try to bypass. For new learners, the most important takeaway is that security strength is not only technical, it is social and organizational, because behavior and habits determine whether controls actually work. When you socialize the program effectively, you create champions who sustain it, and that is how security improvements survive the long run.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.